Hi, I want to welcome you to mattworstell.com and Faith Christian Church in Quincy. Each week we do a little video recap of what it was we talked about on Sunday. Hopefully you're comfortable sitting through a 5 to 7 minute synopsis of what it was that we said rather than a 20 or 30 minute sermon online. So we hope it's a blessing to you and a ministry to you. We've been in this sermon series at Faith for the past few weeks on salt and light, and we've talked about that. Those were the two exclusive statements that Jesus gave to his church. You are salt and you are light. You are it. Both of those things transform what they come into contact with, and Jesus is telling us in a very real way that we are the transforming agent in the world. It's a very exciting thing. I mean, this is something that only only we as the church, we can own. It's just us. It's not going to be the government. They're not going to change the world. It's not going to be other organizations or nonprofits or other religions. It's you and me. You and I are the change agents in the world. And that's really exciting. And that makes me want to follow Jesus. That makes me want to be a disciple. This is a great little pep talk. You and I are it. Yeah, go team, right? Here's the thing, though, is that what we did this week is we turned to Luke chapter 14 because we want to get that emotion in check. In Luke chapter 14, we read that there's a large crowd following Jesus. And these aren't the guys that are antagonistic towards Jesus. These aren't the guys that are trying to chap Jesus. These aren't the Pharisees and Sadducees. These are people that just love hearing what it is that Jesus has to say. They're the followers of Jesus. They're the disciples of Jesus. They like hearing him preach. They like hearing him teach. They may not understand everything he says. Some of the stuff he says is a little wacky, but that's part of the appeal of him. That's part of the draw. And so they're following Jesus. And Luke chapter 14 says he turns to them and he goes into this discourse and he says these things that are pretty hard statements for us. He says, unless you hate basically your entire family, then you are not a disciple. He says, if you don't carry your cross, this death device, this torture device, if you're not carrying a cross on your back in my name, then you're not my disciple. And at the very end, he says, if you're not willing to give up everything to follow me, then you are not my disciple. Now, these are big statements and these are heavy statements. Before we dissect those a little bit, I want to talk about the word disciple. It's used over 250 times in the New Testament. And it basically is what it means is that you are a follower. I am a disciple of someone, and in this case, Jesus. We don't use that term today, really. We talk about discipleship in our churches, but really the term we use is Christian, right? A Christian is a follower of Jesus. You are in Christ as a Christian. So that's usually the term we use. In Acts chapter 11, it tells us that those two words are interchangeable. It says the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. Those two words are interchangeable. They mean the exact same thing. It's like me calling Monica my spouse or my wife. Exact same thing. They don't change the meaning. But for us, I think Christian bears a little more weight. So if we read Luke in that light, Jesus saying, unless you hate your family, then you are not a Christian. That changes it for me. That changes the weight of what it is that Jesus is saying. He says, if you don't carry your cross, then you are not a Christian. He says, if you don't give up everything, then you are not a Christian. You are not what you say you are. That's big. That's heavy. And that's something that maybe we need to take notice of. Am I giving up everything? We need to talk about hate real quick. I use this term way too often in my sermons, and anytime I do, I always get a bunch of phone calls. A preacher shouldn't say hate, it's just not right, and you're probably right. I probably use it more than I should, but when I use it as an exaggeration, as a hyperbole. When I say hate, obviously I get your attention, and it's possible that's what Jesus is doing here. Saying, if you don't hate your mama, and I mean, who do you love most in this world, right? You love your family the most. And he's saying, if you don't hate that you love the most, then you can't follow me. It's possible that's what he's saying. And it's probably not it, though. It's also possible that Jesus is just contradicting himself. The Bible tells us, honor your mother and your father. It's a first commandment with a promise. It says that you need to love others as much as you love yourself. So it's just possible that Jesus is contradicting himself. I don't think that's true either. So what does he mean by hate? Well, for the Jews, hate probably didn't carry the same connotation than what we use it for. As a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I hate the Patriots, right? I do not like them at all. There's nothing about them that I will ever cheer for or ever root for. That's how I mean hate. But for the Jews, it was more of a lesser love. Illustrated this way, I love my wife. The word I use to define my relationship with my wife is love. The greatest thing I can think of is I love her. When I don't tell her I love her every day, she lets me know that, right? Because love is the word I use to define that. I also love barbecue. I love Fatbacks, man. It is my favorite restaurant here in Quincy. I eat there at least once a week, and on a good week, 2 or 3 times. I love barbecue. Same word I use to define my relationship with Fatbacks is the same word I use to define my relationship with my wife. Now, do I love Fatbacks as much as my wife? Absolutely not. It's a lesser love. Still love it. I mean, it's still a love that is very real and very true, as the scales would indicate. But I love my wife a whole lot more than that. And that's what Jesus is getting at here. This is what he means by that. He's saying, you've got to love me more than the thing that you love the most in this world. He's not saying that you don't love them. I mean, I will still eat at Fatbacks. I will still love my family the most that I can love them. But he says, my love, the love you have for me has got to be up here, even higher than the love that you have for your family, you have to have for me. That's the cost of being a disciple. He says, if you can't do that, if you can't find a way to love me more than the thing that you love the most, which all that means is basically that the way I love my wife has to be in tune with the way God tells me to love my wife. I can't love her the way I want to love her. I can't love her the way she wants me to love her. I have to love her the way God tells me to love her. His rule, his guidance, his leading has to be at the very first and foremost. It has to be number one on that list. And if it's not, then I'm not his disciple. I'm not a follower of him. I'm not a Christian. I've lied to myself. I've lied to the world. I've got to love him more than the thing that I love most in this world. He says that's what it means to follow me. He says if you don't do that, if you're not willing to give up everything that I know, everything that I feel, everything that I want, if I can't give that up, then I can't follow him. It's a big and heavy thing, but what an awesome thing. He says, but if you do, if you find out how to love me, if you figure this out, if you can love me more than the most that you love everything else in this world, if I am number one in your world, then you are going to change the world. You are going to have my power living inside of you. You are going to have my spirit living inside of you. You are going to be the ones who change the world because you love me more than you love everything else.